When we went to scale up with our almost $100,000 SBA loan, we spent a lot of money on inventory, but the raw materials were still the same because from our Carnival experience, we figured this is good enough. That was our key blunder. But then the calls changed in tone. The nails fell out. The logo panel was peeling off. The parts were breaking. This is not viable. We have to retrench and do something else. We did as many refunds as were demanded, because if I sold you something, I'm good for it, even if it's out of my pocket and it hurts.
Imagine you've just launched a side hustle that's an immediate hit. You built a prototype, tested the market, and pre-sold a massive number of units. But as you scale up, the dream starts to turn into a nightmare as your products begin breaking in the field, leading to a wave of returns and expensive repairs. You are standing at a crossroads where you can either watch your profits evaporate or find a way to convince your customers that your product is worth even more than they originally paid. Our guest today didn't just save his business from an uh-oh moment. He turned that crisis into a systematic method for spotting hidden risks before they destroy a company. Welcome to today's episode of Your Business Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Shapiro, author of Your Business Growth Playbook, and my guest today is William Holsten. William, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm glad to be here.
So I love that you're in this really unique industry of carnival games. That is, I think, such an interesting backstory midway in your career that I want to really dive a bit more into today. What led you to start this side hustle creating carnival games?
I kind of backed into it. I'm one of 6 kids, and my sister's daughter, my niece, was having a Make-A-Wish carnival one August in her backyard in Pennsylvania. We lived in New Jersey at the time. And we were asked, can everybody please rent or bring a game to help us raise money for Make-A-Wish? And we said, sure. So right away I called, and it was going to be hot and summer. So I called a rental company and reserved a dunk tank and look forward to it. And a week before the event, I got a call from the rental company telling me, sorry, we can't rent that to you. There's a drought, as you know, in the Northeast, there was then, and we can't rent something that requires 500 gallons of water. You want something else? And I said, nah, we got this. We'll figure something out. So my wife and my kids and I sat down at our table, back of the napkin, figured out how might we deliver the fun of a dunk tank without 500 gallons. What we came up with became the game that's now called Pitch Burst. It's a game that we cobbled together using materials from Home Depot and a sporting goods store, a 4x8 sheet of plywood with a basketball rim hanging out to the side with a target on a toggle that made the pin go into the balloon. So somebody sits under the balloon, and when somebody throws the ball, hits the target, the balloon pops and the water falls on them, using maybe a half a gallon each play instead of the 500 gallons to fill up. We went to this carnival. It was a blisteringly hot summer August day, and it was the hit of the carnival. We probably made $500 to $600 and were the biggest attraction at that carnival. And we went home sweaty and tired, but really proud that we had done something cool. And then the phone started to ring. Where can I get a game like that? Can I buy one? Where could I use it for my party? I was working in business development at my day job, and I said, boy, I bet you we can do something here. So took a few weeks, a couple months, researched it, found out never been done. So we filed for a provisional patent. The provisional patent let us then get a small business loan to go start producing these while I still work full-time and get going as a side gig. That's how we got into carnival business. We didn't say, what should we do? Where should we go? It happened to us.
You know, I love that you had this idea. You tested it out pretty quickly. You know, we often talk about minimum viable products or MVPs, and you did just that. You proved it out. You showed the market is interested in this, and the demand showed up in the form of those phone calls. What a great way to test that early on. So tell us how that felt. You had an MVP working and people actually were asking about how to buy this for their own, business. What was that like at that time?
As a person with a marketing background, I was thrilled because this found me. I didn't find it. We were happy that we saw kids were lining up to be the ball thrower and to be the kid getting soaked, and the parents were standing there taking pictures over and over again. So we knew we had something viral if viral existed back then. It's 20 or more years, so it wasn't viral, but it was cool. It felt wonderful. It felt rewarding. It felt we had done something right, not only for the charity, but for future business potential.
Yeah, so you've got a great marketing background. I'd love to hear your thoughts on like market differentiation, right? We think about carnival games and sort of the standby games we've seen for generations, and occasionally something new comes along. So when you guys started Whirlwinds, like how did you differentiate some of your games like Pitch Burst and Boom Blaster from the more traditional options that we've seen for so long in the market?
We actually named the company Whirlwinds because we wanted it to be a joyful delivery of whimsical stuff. So we always look for a wow moment. Our theme used to be games with wow and whimsy. So the water balloon popping and falling down on somebody, that's a wow moment. Our Boom Blaster game was an air balloon popping game. Looks like dynamite detonators where you're pumping a pump to blow up a balloon in a stand across from you. And you have 2 to 4 to 6 of these side by side. The first one to pop is the winner. That's a wow moment. And even in the trade shows we used to demonstrate at, we would always set up 8 side by side. Kids would just come up and play, and the crowds would gather around for that wow moment. That's what we built into everything we did.
I mean, that sounds like, first of all, a really fun trade show to go to. So your market is other businesses that were creating games for the industry, and you're selling against them. You also got to the point where the market proved out and you're scaling up and selling to more, carnival operators or individual game operators. Like who exactly was that customer?
The customers were, in the beginning, only rental stores who rented party equipment and tables, chairs, blah, 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 and games like dunk tanks, like toss across, like a whole bunch of visual games customers can have delivered or pick up and drop off again. Over time, when our games gained popularity and we went to the main trade show, which is International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, we attracted theme parks. We attracted event planner companies. So we had a much larger audience than we originally intended to attract.
Got it. So now you begin the scaling side of things. And I love this part of the journey. As you scaled, things don't always go the way they go when you're building onesie twosie units. What were some of the quality issues that you found came up as you began to produce and ship more and more of these units?
I'll speak mainly about the Pitch Burst one. We did have lessons with the other ones as well. Pitch Burst, I mentioned we went to Home Depot, pulled together a plywood thing and stuff from a sporting goods store. When we went to scale up with our almost $100,000 SBA loan, we spent a lot of money on inventory, but we produced it kind of like we had done our MVP of wood. We improved the design. We made it foldable. We did that, but the raw materials were still the same because from our carnival experience, we figured this is good enough. That was our key blunder. It turns out in commercial rental, when these are being picked up or dropped off from stores, they're not handled as delicately as I did with my own prototype. So in our first season, we sold 60 of these in a few months, and they got shipped when the batch was done. And we got some early calls saying, this is fantastic. It's exactly what I wanted, from customers telling us what their customers said. But then the calls changed in tone. Oh, the nails fell out. The logo panel was peeling off. The parts were breaking. We immediately went into crisis mode and make good parts. We would be on the phone with customers and customers of customers explaining how to do it so it wouldn't break. But learned in maybe 2 weeks and maybe dozens of calls, this is not viable. We have to retrench and do something else. By the way, we were excited about the commercial appeal because a dunk tank at that time cost $2,000. I think they're more now. And our game was selling, this wooden thing was $7.99, its original price. And we're making about a 50% margin. So we said if we can increase the frequency of this and the quantity, we're going to be in good shape. But that all fell apart when we had to pull the plug on it. We did as many refunds as were demanded. because if I sold you something, I'm good for it, even if it's out of my pocket and it hurts. But what we did then is retrench. We confirmed by calling customers the play of the game was still highly attractive. The execution of it was not. We asked them before we did anything else, would you be interested in a revised game which is durable enough for this purpose? And to a person, they said yes. So it took us 24 months, but we borrowed more money, had a designer CAD it for us in steel, and then we found a manufacturer to make it for us in steel. That was more than 20 years ago. It's still in the market today. We solved it. We raised our price. The original price of $799 went up 60% to almost $1,300, and everybody who bought the original one bought the new one.
Are you enjoying this episode? Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. That'll help you get more episodes automatically as soon as they come out. So hit that subscribe button right now. And if you have a minute, leave a quick rating and review. That helps support the show. So I want to get more into that in just a moment. And that's really good that you have those numbers. Profitability wise, you had a great profit margin, but you also had to eat into that to either take returns back or ship parts out and all that. The idea sometimes in business of chasing gross sales can distract us from this idea of chasing profitability. Tell me more about, how that changed things when you got into that crisis mode. Many business owners are lucky not to face that, but at times it can be inevitable that you end up in crisis and have to figure out about doing the right thing, doing the fiscally responsible thing, taking care of your customers, like, you and I both agree is so vitally important in business. Walk us through sort of that crisis time of what guided those decisions and got you to do that right thing, even with the impact on profitability.
It was driven by reputation. I was embarrassed that we had gotten this wrong. And I like to be treated as a customer. So despite the cost and the personal hurt, we went forward with the whole thing. Luckily, we didn't sell 6,000 out of the gate. We sold 60. So we were making goods on a finite amount. As we went forward, and then it was 2 years after that, we launched the Boom Blaster game, and a few other games came after that. Each one, we took additional care to do the testing to be sure it was as good as can be. We still learned some lessons, but they were less dramatic than that pitch burst one.
Yeah, and for our listeners, this idea of like running into stumbles as you scale is so common. It's generally not something that you avoid. It's something you anticipate that you'll run into issues. And thankfully, in William's case, he had the budget for it. And that's something we all should have so that you can learn some of these lessons earlier on. And I like that you shipped that batch of 60. You learned some lessons with that size batch. You're then able to revise, improve, and go for that next batch and take those lessons learned to other games. So let's talk about this more premium version that you're talking about is still in circulation today. When you realize that the one-off plywood version was not as durable and you shifted to the more expensive model, how did you look at the numbers to determine where that price point should be? And how did you test that with your customers to make sure they'd be okay with that price point?
Far less formal tested than you might expect, but we did look at maintaining the margin with our new cost of goods, with the new manufacturing. It is difficult, and this we'll get to a final lesson learned later, which is very important if you're starting out. But we looked at, let's maintain the margin percentage and scale up. And when that was not too much, nobody balked at it, we're able to do it. By the way, in 3 years later, industry and steel prices went up. So our price wound up being close to $1,500, 16% higher than that. And I learned by knowing my customers, to them who buy bounce houses and other things in the tens of thousands of dollars, this was not pocket change, but whether it was $1,000 or $1,500 was far less important than it is a wow moment for their customers. And it's durable that they don't have the things we went through originally.
One of the things I like about B2B is you can often sell things based on the ROI, right? If the thing you're selling makes your customer more money, that's a win. Do your customers look at their purchases that way in terms of like, if I buy this bounce house, how much do I make back? If I buy this game, what does it earn me? Like, is that how they typically look at their purchases?
What I learned from them was there's a rule of thumb that whatever I pay for something, I need to be able to rent it out 5 times and make my money back on a top line revenue basis. And in that case, it meant at a $1,300 game, it needs to be renting at a couple $100 at a time, and they're good. And they were. By the way, we built more purchases into the game. We didn't just sell the unit, especially when we had the steel one. We built a carry bag for it. We would sell logo balloons. We would sell the specialized balls in bulk. So a little bit of razor and blade. You buy the thing, and then we're selling these accessories to it. It added 30% to our revenue.
Okay, let's dive into that for a second. So you had your core product that was selling. You then expanded that to increase the dollar amount of that initial purchase, as well as the frequency for customers coming back and buying more add-ons. How often were people taking up on the opportunities to upsell at the time of purchase versus coming back to you after the fact and buying more? Like, what was that like for your customers?
It was about half and half. At the trade shows, we would sell packages, which at a discount put 3 or 4 things together, and they would buy that and they'd be set for the year's supplies. But others would call to every couple of months when they ran out of balloons, because the balloon said the pitch burst name on it. It made it sound more official. They would come by and back a case. They'd buy a case of 1,000 every few months.
That's excellent. So you had not just bundling, which is a strategy we love and we talk about, for those upfront sales. You also had customers coming back and buying the disposables, right? These balloons that they would use, run out of, and need to buy more of. And you had the upsells that they could add things onto their order at the time of purchase or at the time of repurchase. That is excellent, super well done. And you saw, the benefits of that. Huge. So for our listeners, if you don't have bundles or packages or upsells or add-ons or consumables, like these are all tremendous things William was using in his business that increase not just obviously revenues, but those are also highly profitable things. Someone's transacting once, and we're now making a lot more out of that. So huge, huge kudos.
We didn't consider at the time a subscription model, but we could have done that. You buy the game, and then every 3 months we'll send you what you need. It's a double benefit.
Love that. All right, so let's talk about implementation. As you moved to this higher cost model that also then had a higher price and adding these other items into the catalog, like what were some of the hurdles you faced? Because you had to you have a term I love, which is goof proof. How did you goof proof your product design so that it was more reliable and is still here all these years later?
It was a matter of testing. Our 4th game, which I won't get into much detail with, but at the time, there was a time in my life I had heart surgery and realized I need to exit this business. And we found a partner who for a few years did our marketing for us when I couldn't. And then later they bought the IP, so they owned it. They took my 4th game called Downpour Derby, which is, I won't take the time to describe it, but it was a bucket water game. And their market was more theme of water parks and camps. So they took our base IP and redesigned it for water parks and camps and developed a prototype. I was at their shop and I saw their new thing. I said, oh, it's pretty cool. You're going to sell it right away? And these are the words that I wish I'd learned earlier myself. No, we're going to give it to a couple of our best customers for the summer. Let them use it. I'll ask them to kick the snot out of it, my favorite expression. And then we'll come back in the fall, see what went wrong, then redesign it and sell the next version. So we did our best. We were a small company, just me, my wife, my family. We didn't have the testing methodology that these guys did.
I love that early testing. In software, this is getting your beta testers. I've done that for, all of our SaaS products, is getting early users providing feedback. And I was surprised as I embarked on the authorship journey of publishing my book that exists for book publishing as well, of getting early beta readers looking at the rough manuscript and giving feedback early before it's permanently on bookshelves and bookstores, libraries, and so forth. Your partner was able to implement that to get feedback and have the snot kicked out of it. So that's cool. Now, looking back, earlier pre-Carnival game, you've had a tremendous corporate career and working in the world of corporate innovation and all. So how did you find the corporate experience translated over to innovating within your own business and for your own customers?
My early training was in branding. So each of my games wound up with a handle, a name, which we knew worked just on judgment. I hired good graphic designer to really make it look professional. We actually looked much more important than we really were because these things look so good. It was about understanding the customer experience that drove most of this, to deliver that wow. In the world I was in, consumer healthcare products, we talk about when somebody's suffering from something, what do they do to make it better? This was, you're enjoying your life. How do we make it wow and memorable? So that understanding about customer experience was really important. There's a mid-level when you're B2B, your rental company, your buyer's experience also needs to be taken into account because they have expertise. They're not playing the game. They're expecting it to be resilient, profitable, attractive, and also promoted so they don't have to do all the promotion about it.
Now, you've taken a lot of the wisdom you learned from not just corporate, but from running your own businesses and done something much more recent and I think much more applicable to entrepreneurs more broadly. And before we get into that, though, I want to understand sort of the origins of that next step for you. Where did you look for inspiration outside of the carnival industry to help find those like behavioral risk patterns, like stress and distraction, and what those do to entrepreneurs? Was that something you faced yourself, or you saw in the industry, or outside the industry?
Yeah, when I'm retired now from my day job for the past 3 years, and I was committed that when I finished that, I wanted to tell my story, much of which I just shared here, so others could learn from it. But when I looked at my draft, I said, well, nobody's going to care about that. So I built into it some tools, into my book, some tools that I used in workshops to come up with new ideas for healthcare products. I applied them into the entrepreneurial space. And there are 10 tools in my book called How Not to Make Mistakes. And I began calling myself the business mistake prevention expert, a specialist. And after a while, I realized I'm not such a specialist because my experience is just what I kind of knew from book knowledge and from workshops. So the step I took was to do a national study, employing 300 entrepreneurs across SaaS to restaurants, to also people starting businesses, running businesses. And it was all about understanding what are the conditions that lead to mistakes. And that's where we deduced it does include stress, fatigue, distraction, making or relying on faulty assumptions, missing customer signals, and then sometimes, and it was my case, knowledge gaps. I didn't know what I didn't know, and that can get me in trouble. We did the study late last year. I published it earlier this year and learned that 4 of those factors usually don't happen one at a time. When one starts, if you're stressed, you're also tired. You can get distracted. Cell phones are the worst thing for that, and faulty assumptions. So we dug into that. By the way, we learned that 9 out of 10 people have of these entrepreneurs said that they'd made a business impactful mistake in the past year. And 18%, almost 1 in 5, said they'd made 5 or more. So we prepared a quiz of 12 questions that probe on all 6 of those categories. And we asked people to rate themselves, this never happens, or this always happens, or something in between. We were able then to take the answers of the 300 people and put them in risk bands, high, medium, and low. It's about 10% are, at the moment they took the quiz, in the high, about 50% are in the medium, and everybody else is in the low. We found people couldn't predict what stage they were in. They said I'm low, but in fact, their behaviors based on their questions told us, you're doing some high-risk behaviors here. We looked at those and then said, well, how do we make this useful? And we boiled it down to what I call STORM and SAFER, 2 acronyms that help everybody understand what is the conditions you're operating in now. A lot of times under normal conditions, you can do deep thinking, you can be creative, you can look at alternatives, but when you're deep into it and it's high pressure, you can't. So the STORM acronym is about realizing how bad is it right now? Because if it's bad, like driving in bad weather, You might go slower. You might be more careful. You might keep the lights on. You might put your wipers on. Do things you wouldn't always do, but under these stressful conditions, you do. The STORM stands for stressed, tired, overloaded, rushed, and missing signals. One of those is okay. Two of those there's no science to it, but if you get 2, 3, 4 of those at the same time and you're aware of it, pause. Be careful.
Learned an acronym from a friend of mine that we apply to cycling, and he knew it from motorcycle days, which was the acronym HALT, which is before you get on your bike, ask, are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired? Because if you're any of those things, going at a high speed on 2 wheels may not be good for your longevity and safety. And it's good to have those acronyms and those self-checks like STORM. Tell us about the other side. Tell us about SAFER.
The SAFER, the letters stand for slow down at moments that matter. Don't rush along. Take a pause. Even a 5-second pause before you make a choice. Take an action. A is assumption check before you decide. So often we're just assuming things are this way because, and you don't stop and think. So do some checking on some assumptions. Even one assumption can help you. Focus is all about reducing distractions. During this bad weather time, reduce all other distractions except what you need to focus on so you don't mess up. E is energy guardrails. It means for fatigue, schedule your most important work, your most important decisions, your most precision actions when you know you're not going to be that tired. And then R is raise small issues early. That is, we learned that one of the things when people are under this bad weather stress, they defer important discussions. Discussions with colleagues, with customers, and then by deferring, it gets worse. So STORM, then SAFER. To help people with this, we put this quiz online as something free your listeners could do right now. And it gives them their own rating of low, medium, or high risk based on their answers to those 12 questions. And without cost, without obligation, I don't need you on my email list. It gives you some of these SAFER recommendations.
Yeah, it was insightful when I went through and took that assessment. I am sensitive to words like always and never. So when I saw those, I had to be mindful of well, does this happen, rarely, but sometimes, let me be honest with this. But the assessment was insightful. I also like how you have those two sides between STORM and SAFER. One, which is the recognize and interrupt that pattern, which is a good first step. But that second side of okay, now I've recognized there's an issue. What do I do? That SAFER I found is really valuable. So when you did this study, what were some of the other unexpected findings or surprises that surfaced for you in putting the study together?
I can share right off the bat. We did the quantitative was those 12 questions, and we asked qualitative questions. What is the worst mistake you've ever made? What are you afraid of in the future? And we learned that the 5 biggest fears from this set of 300 American entrepreneurs, number 1 would be disappointing customers. Number 2 is about looking unprofessional or careless in what they're doing. Number 3 is that they're losing control somehow. 4 was revealing to me, because I realized on myself, that your own behavior is holding the business back. That is procrastination, getting distracted and not living up to promises. And then the 5th is the rarest, but it's possibly the most critical, irreversible harm or catastrophic loss. Somebody gets hurt, injured, killed, that you can't take back.
Yeah, those are reasonable concerns for business owners to have. That's great. So if you're talking to a founder or a business owner who themselves is kind of repeating those same mistakes or falling into these patterns again and again because they're overloaded, distracted, or sort of checking some of those boxes on precursors to mistakes, what's a piece of advice you would give to someone in that situation?
Do your best to be aware of your surroundings and the conditions under which you're operating. The STORM is a one easy way to do a checklist, but keep tabs maybe on a weekly basis. Look back on the week before. Were there times you were stressed? Did you check any assumptions? Did you get caught up because you didn't look into how distracted you were? Make it part of the routine. In the future, later this year, I'll probably have online courses or something to teach this more formally, but the takeaway and what I will teach is make it part of your routine to be aware of the conditions. When I learned, and we did these 300 people in the study, I learned that 10% are at high risk and 50% are over medium and the rest are at low. That was a point in time. And I deduced from that that everybody goes through these cycles of high risk, low risk. Everybody's not stuck in that point of time. And if you reach that this risk level is rising, do something. Do those safer steps, or do one of those safer steps. Maybe just doing the pause so you get time to think.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I like that approach of, I think especially as entrepreneurs, it can feel overwhelming of all the things we can do, but it's not about doing all of them. Sometimes it's exactly as you're saying, William, it's about doing one of the things.
There are 3 things we also realized in the study that help safer work better. They are: 1, self-assess and be aware. And I'll give you the URL so your listeners can do that. 2 are have structures, tools, and routines to help you mitigate your risk. I talk often about checklists and pre-mortems to imagine you might fail and see what you could do today. Things like that. They're more structured than just safer. And then the third is use outside perspectives as much as you can or as much as relevant. That is, get a mentor, ask experts, or just get a naive observer to give you objective feedback on what you're trying to do. Because often when I was a lone entrepreneur, I felt isolated and alone and unsupported, and I didn't know where to go for help. I was embarrassed that I needed it. But when you ask for it, now I'm a SCORE mentor, there are people for free available to you who will give you advice. It's still up to you to do the thinking and work, but ask, because don't assume you're alone.
I often say that as an entrepreneur, it gets lonely at the top. Who do you talk to about the challenges, the wins, the successes, the fears, the concerns, the problems, when you feel like no one else gets it? It's not usually your employees. It's, there's not really coworkers in that regard, not always your family, friends. It can be lonely and tough. So yes, get that help. Connect with those who've been there, done that. Surround yourself with like-minded entrepreneurs, right? You don't have to go at it alone. So I love that you have been helping so many entrepreneurs in that way. That's great. So when we look back, you exited that previous business, which I think is tremendous. As you look back, knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently in your businesses with the knowledge you have from the survey, from having run the businesses, from having sold the businesses and so forth?
One thing which only became obvious to me while I was writing my story in the book, and that is, at one point in my life, I had this big successful pitch burst game that I was thrilled about. People were demanding, and I had a patent on it. I chose to do a DIY bootstrap, start this and have them made and do the selling, where a clear choice I might have preferred, looking back on it, was find somebody in this industry already good at that. My patent was an asset. I could have licensed or sold it. Now, looking back, I've learned so many lessons because I did it that way. It was just really hard. But that was a choice. And my lesson, my advice is always think of what's the other right answer. Don't assume there's only one way to do something, because there's always 10 ways of doing it. And be sure you've explored to know you're on a path that is going to bring you joy and profit without as much stress as you can.
Yeah, I think oftentimes there's the feeling of there's the one right way and everything else is the wrong way. And when you expand that pie, like you're talking about there, of saying there are many ways to get somewhere, which is the path you'd like, right? For business owners, sometimes there's this idea of you must scale to become this decacorn company, or why are you in business? And you don't need to build a business of that scale or that size. That's probably not going to help you check the boxes.
Unless that's your skill set. And there are many people who are like that.
Yeah. And if that does bring you joy and fulfillment and meaning and all that stuff, then for sure. But that doesn't mean everyone is meant to do that. And that's okay. So back to the risk quiz. What is the best way for business owners to use tools like your risk quiz to track their numbers and their habits and really get that visibility to things that can prevent those costly blunders proactively.
I'll give you the URL in a minute because it's easy to find. To use it well, I suggest taking the quiz once, getting your, call it a benchmark rating, because that's how you are at the moment you took it. Then pay attention because you get free advice when you get it, and it tells you some of these safer steps. Put one or two of them to use that first week after you use it and see if it's going to help you. And if it doesn't, go back to the advice and try something else. After a month, take the quiz again. It's the same set of questions, but you might have a different perspective, and you can track, you don't have to, but you can track your score over time. But because they're the same questions, it'll be repetitive after the third time, you know.
KPIs are powerful, but when you look at trend lines on those data points, that I think is huge. So good job on not just having the assessment as this quantitative tool, but having those trends as well. All right, so to recap for our listeners, your business faced a big uh-oh moment where quality issues threatened the business, but by choosing to take care of your customers first and then increase your prices and focus on goof-proofing your operations, you turned a potential failure into a successful exit. Is that about right?
That's about right.
Great. And so for our listeners who want to learn more about you or take their mistake risk quiz, where should they go right now?
I want to be sure I say it correct. It is that URL, mistake risk quiz, those three words together, mistakeriskquiz.com. It's available right now, and it takes you 5 minutes.
That's excellent. So that is mistakeriskquiz.com. I've gone through and taken that assessment, and now you've just reminded me to do is to go back and take that again to see if the implementation of some of those habit changes has had a measurable effect. William, thank you so much for joining us on the show today and sharing your story. You've had a tremendous career and done so much. And I love that you are the inventor archetype that has been able to leverage that and truly build a successful business that you grew and were able to sell. And you've gone on to give back and help out so many entrepreneurs out there. And we're better because of you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much for listening. Quick reminder, hit that subscribe button right now so you can get more episodes when they come out automatically. And remember to leave that rating and review right now.